I'm Joe Kane.
I'm Dan Kane.
And I'm Sal Conca.
And this is the Imperfect Podcast.
Don't forget to check us out at hecklerkane.com and everywhere on social media.
To the bumper.
So we're here today with Ruth Hill. She is a single mother of a 13-year-old girl and lives in Yelm, Washington, the Seattle-Tacoma area. She's a substitute teacher, a singer, a film and television show reviewer, blogger, writer, and interviewer. She runs the site mydevotionalthoughts.net, which she started back in 2009. Hey, Ruth, how are you?
I'm all right. How are you guys?
Awesome.
Good.
Thanks so much for joining us. We got introduced through Twitter, actually, because you found our podcast on Swivel Shot, where we interviewed Christopher Gladys and Rick Ravanello, and we found out that you had previously had them interviewed for your blog. So tell us a little about your blog. How did you get started with that?
It was almost by accident. I had been following a lot of blogs. I had recently moved back to Washington State and had some extra time on my hands because I was now a substitute teacher rather than being a regular classroom teacher. And I'd always had a love for writing, and I started following all these blogs. And I remember one day just finally saying to myself, well, I could do it just as well as these people and probably even better. So I just sat down and started blogging and had no idea what I was doing. Just kind of jumped in and learned how to build a website and asked a lot of questions. And then it really has only been in the past couple years that I've started to review movies and TV shows. And then in January of this year, I started interviewing actors. I had made a lot of connections through reviewing movies and TV shows.
What's your interviewing process? Because do you call them on the phone? Do you Skype with them? Do you send a questionnaire and have them type it back? Or what is your process that you go through when you're interviewing?
All of the above that you just mentioned.
Okay.
Seriously, I try to make it as easy as possible. At first, it was all going to be phone interviews. When I first started interviewing, that was what I thought you always did. And then as I started talking with actors, they'd say, well, my schedule's really crazy. Or I live in England and I'm 8 hours ahead of you. And so the time difference can be an issue as well. And they said, is there any way I could just email it to you? And I thought, yeah, sure. That's great. And then I'll never forget the time that one of the actors, and it was actually an older actor, like I want to say he's close to 60, and so it shocked me when he said, well, why can't we, let's go ahead and Skype. And I'm thinking, you're almost 60 and you want to Skype. And I remember being very, very nervous the first time Skyping with an actor, because you hear all the horror stories online. Well, what if this person is not really who they say they are? What if they're, serial killer out to get me or something? I mean, those, and I know it's crazy, but being someone who doesn't really know anything about the process, it was a little intimidating at first. But then once I got going with it, it was perfectly fine. So I try my very best to, when I reach out to actors, I usually reach out on Twitter most of the time. I'll ask them for an interview, and I kind of try to work it whatever's easiest for them. That's always, I want them the most comfortable, and about half the people do say email's the easiest just because their schedule's so crazy.
That's cool. So here's a fun question. Do you remember what was your first interview, or who was your first interview?
Oh yeah, I remember my first interview, because that was back in January, and it happened to be one of my favorite actors. I happened to do a lot with the Hallmark Network. That's kind of how I started, was working with a lot of those actors, those shows and movies. And so the first actor is an actor by the name of Brendan Elliott, who is most known probably outside of Hallmark for being in the Lifetime show Unreal. He has a small part in that, and he also was in one of the Chucky films back many years ago. So that's kind of his fault, what he's known for. And he had been one of my favorite actors, and I asked him, and seriously, within like 10 minutes, he already responded and said yes.
Cool.
And And then it was like, then I found out that night that I was interviewing him in 2 days, and I was, it was not so much intimidated talking with him. It was, I want to do a good job because he's a really great actor, and he's been so supportive of my reviews. I've reviewed a lot of his works, and he is always very supportive. And I wanted to do a good job. I wanted to make sure that whatever I did, that I was asking the right questions and that everything came off really well. And what was really funny was I didn't know that my phone was not set up to accept like private call, like a private caller. I didn't know that my phone company automatically blocked private callers. So I get this message from him saying, I tried to call and it won't let me through.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're trying for about 45 minutes. He's really patient, trying to get this worked out. Because I live in the country, I don't get cell phone reception out here. So I told him, okay, we'll do it on my cell phone, but you have to wait about 15 minutes. I'll let you know, because I had to drive to where I could get service. So my first interview was in front of a nearby gas station. I was in the parking lot.
That's great.
You gotta roll with the punches and do what you can do, I guess.
Oh yeah, and it really was great. It was honestly, he was great about it, and he would actually, what was cool about it is he was excited to talk to me as I was to him, because he was interested to know who I was because I had been such a supporter of his career.
That's awesome.
That's kind of the whole point of any interview, is that you're excited to talk to the person. Sal told me that we were setting this up with you, and I'd seen you on your Twitter feed and everything, and I was pretty excited when this was all set up just to talk to you too. So it's always a fun thing.
Yeah,
exactly.
It is.
You do a lot of interviews with guys from independent films, and you do a lot of things that are independent film based. What drew you to independent films in particular?
Well, I knew nothing whatsoever about independent films until I happened to interview, and this was again an interview really almost by mistake. I don't even have any clue why I contacted this guy, except that he was following me, and somehow I was following him, and my friends knew about him. Kyle Hester, which I think you guys are familiar with, with him.
Zombie with a Shotgun, yeah.
Yeah.
I interviewed him, reached out to interview him, and we set something up, and I had no idea. I could not have told you. I didn't even know what indie film meant. I would never have been able to even tell you what that was. I just didn't know. But we had a really great conversation, and he explained everything about independent films, all the funding. I had no idea that any of this whole new world to me, and he just kind of opened it up for me, and I thought, this is really cool. This is great that they're being able to do these projects that the studios aren't doing.
Mm-hmm.
The studio put out some great stuff, that's true, but it's great to be able to have these stories that maybe nobody else would get to tell, and these people are going out and they're raising funds for it. They're involving people in the whole process, and so he got me so excited that I started supporting independent film projects and reading up on them, and so then that led me to continue to check out more and more independent films. But the thing is, every single one of those that I got to watch, people went in and did so much work behind the scenes. They had a vision, and maybe if it wasn't, in fact, remember I had somebody tell me this, somebody that I'd interviewed for independent films. Maybe it wasn't the way you would have done it, but they did something. They actually got up one day and decided, I'm going to do this. I've got this passion, and some of them have to work for years to raise the money, to get all the crew, and to get the actors, and I'm honestly in awe of what independent filmmakers do when I realize all the work that goes into what they do. It's amazing.
Yeah, we've been doing some smaller projects over the last year or two, and there is just a ton of work. I mean, done a couple of film competitions and a couple of film festivals, and the work just to get the film produced on zero budget, basically, right? And then marketing it and then entering into the festival. Yeah, there's a ton of work that goes into it, and that's why it's great to have somebody like you here that really truly supports indie film. And part of the reason we're doing this podcast is so we can also help build more relationships in the industry and meet more people this way, and all that type of stuff, and be able to help other independent filmmakers have a platform so they can showcase their stuff. So
there's a ton of people out there who are wanting to even get into film and don't know how. And the hope is that, by hearing some of these things, this little bit of advice that you're giving or we're giving throughout our podcasts can help somebody. Hopefully that brings somebody and gives them enough courage to go out and do it. Because honestly, that's a big part of what it takes. It takes a lot of courage just to go, okay, I'm going to start this thing and see it to fruition. Mm-hmm. It's not an easy task. It's daunting.
I mean, how many interviews and reviews do you think you've conducted at this point?
Interviews, I think I figured out it's been around 125 interviews that I've done.
Wow.
And that's since January?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
She's a workhorse, this one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some of them were not featured on my site, because when I first started interviewing, I actually did for a while work with an online magazine. They were actually the ones that I kind of originally started interviewing people, and really it just became that they had a different vision than I did as far as interviews went, because I tend to be one that goes very much in depth, and also I'm very conversational. I'm not one that tends to just talk about the project and dissect. Sometimes I've read interviews where they take the film or the show and they just dissect it in great detail, and the person's character, and they start asking things that for me, I'm not really that interested in. Sometimes I get bored really reading interviews, I'll be honest, that sometimes and it's not so much the interviewer's fault even, it's just that they're sometimes asking things that I'm not that interested in, because what I really want to do is I want to find out who the person is.
Well, it's funny you say that, because like the first line on your website there is that you're a single mother who teaches. And that stood out to me as going, I'm not a blogger, I'm not this, I'm not whatever. This is me. So what you just said there is obviously vindicated in your message that you put out there. I mean, your about line: a single mother who teaches, sings, reads, blogs is one of the last thing, and loves God with all her heart. That's your about tagline. So it's exactly what you're talking about. Know the person behind you, know who they are, and then what they do is subsequent to that.
Is there one? This is from the guy in the corner that you can't see.
We can shift.
all the interviews that you've done, is there one in particular that kind of stands out as a personal favorite of yours?
Oh yes. I had the opportunity a few months ago to interview Marshall Teague. I don't know if you guys know him. He's most known for being in the movie The Roadhouse.
Oh yeah, with
Crazy.
Patrick Swayze, right?
Yep. And he is like the he plays Jimmy. I think that's his character's name. If I remember right. He's like the bouncer.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like a big fight scene and all that. And anyway, Marshall Teague, I actually got to know him through Rick Ravanello, because they made a movie together a few years ago. And so I didn't know much about Marshall when I first interviewed him. And so I had the opportunity, and it was really something to get to talk to him, because he has these fantastic stories. He's been in the business for many, many years. And we ended up talking nearly 2 hours.
How long was the blog that came out of that?
That's a lot of editing.
That one, it is on my blog. I actually had to break it into 2 parts because there was so much.
Yeah.
that he had so much. And what's really cool about Marshall also is he also is very big on independent films. In fact, tonight one of the independent films that he was in is actually at the Long Beach Film Festival in California.
What if you could interview anybody through past history, alive or dead or past, or, you know, is there anybody throughout history that you would love to interview?
I would even open that question up to, you know, not just filmmakers or anything else.
Yeah,
anyone that you
anyone
would like to interview.
Yeah, and I was actually thinking about this last night. I was thinking through that question. I was thinking, who would I interview if it could be anyone? Honestly, I think the person that I would interview, and it does happen to be somebody who was connected with television, but someone who I think was influential in my life was actually Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. You probably know about that.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny, but when I was growing up, I was again, I mean, even quieter, even shyer than I am now, and there were a lot of family issues. There were a lot of things going on, and I was usually by myself a lot and didn't have a lot of confidence in who I was. And I can remember turning on his program, and I was even older when I really got in. I wasn't like a little tiny kid. I was in elementary school, and just somehow I hadn't even realized the show, and I started turning it on. And since he was a musician, I connected that way, because since I knew he played the piano, I played the piano. He'd write songs, and I remember even that kind of got me going, oh, I can write songs. And I remember actually kind of playing around with that idea, writing songs. And so I think that although I never knew him, although I actually, before he passed away, the coolest thing that happened is I was able to send him an email, and I actually did get a response back. And that was really cool, because I wanted to let him know that, you know, how influential he'd been in my young life. And I think that it would be really cool if I could interview anyone. I think I would choose him, just because.
That's good.
That's excellent.
That's a great story. Yeah.
I was just completely enthralled in your story right there. That was amazing.
I mean, we all grew up watching Mr. Rogers. Obviously, he's an icon, right? He's an iconic television character, actor, right? And you're right. I think people forget that he was a musician as well, on top of that. And yeah, I mean, that it's anybody, that's the power of television and movies, right? You never know where somebody's going to influence you from. So you mentioned, you know, making money with your blog and things like that. I mean, obviously, other people aspire to having blogs. Do you make a living with the site?
I do not at this point. I do have some, on occasion, I'm able to do like a sponsored post or something like that, and I will get some money off of that. I was at a point where I was starting down that road, but when I changed over to doing the reviews and interviews, I think that changed a few things, and it's kind of like I had to, in some ways, I kind of had to start building things again. I mean, yes, I had the social media following, which I'm grateful for. I've worked extremely hard to build the social following that I have. That's been, probably I concentrate on that sometimes more than I do building the following on my blog. So at this point, it's not been for money. I'm not making money on the site necessarily, but I think that it's getting closer to that point, I guess I'd say. I hope to sometime in the near future to have it at least where I'm making a part-time income. That would be nice.
Sure, yeah, of course. I mean, that's everybody's dream, right? Make a living doing what you love. Right, and that's what we sit around talking about. It's like, okay, how do we continue to get to that next step? How to, you know, I think when we spoke to Rick Ravanello on the interview, it was like, you know, don't kid yourself that it's not about the money. The money allows us to get from the next project to the next, right? So we're all on $0, zero budgets right now, trying to help each other out, which is, we really appreciate you taking the time to be on our show, because we're just starting out with this podcast as well. So hopefully you'll get to see one of our films in the near future. We'd love to have you do that. But what recommendations would you have for somebody starting a independent blog, or just a blog in general?
You have to figure out why you're wanting to do this. I have followed enough blogs. I've followed the blogging community, and I've seen blogs that make it and blogs that fail. And a lot of times the blogs that fail, they're doing it for the wrong reasons. They are going into it thinking that they've heard the success stories of these big time bloggers that make $100,000 a year blogging or something like that. And I'm not making that up. There are bloggers, of course, that are able to make that kind of money. And so some people go into it with the whole mindset of, I'm going to make lots of money. I'm going to get free products that I can that I can review. And I've had even people that will look at what I'm doing. Oh, you're getting to interview all these great people. And I think sometimes these people think that quite literally I sit around all day and interview famous people. And that's not the way it works. A lot of people are not willing to put the work into it and the time that's necessary, especially when you get started. You're not going to be making anything, and probably you're going to have to put out some money for it to initially get yourself started. So you have to realize, why am I doing this? Am I doing this because I really have a passion? I'm passionate about writing. I'm passionate about reviewing these things. Whatever your focus is, you need to figure that out first. And so if you're doing it for the right reasons, then you next need to do some research to figure out what blogging platform you're going to start on and all that. But I think the main thing is get your focus right, because it's also not going to be to become rich and famous. That it's the same kind of thing as acting. I'm always asking actors, what's your advice for people who want to become actors or want to be a part of the entertainment business? Well, of course, it's not to be rich and famous, because that's not probably, there's a good chance that's not going to happen.
It's a premise that I've brought up before as well in other episodes, and it's about this concept of starting with why. And I'll call it out because it was a book that I read, and it's by a gentleman named Simon Sinek. And the book is called Start With Why. It's a business book, and he has this premise called the Golden Circle that he talks about, and it's really easy for people. They talk about what they do and how they do it, but a lot of people can't explain, or companies or businesses. And just like you, your blog is a personal brand, right? It's business for you almost. And a lot of people aren't able to talk about why they do what they do. People go, why do you want to start a blog? Because I want to make money. No, money is an end result of doing what you want to do, or what you're passionate about. Just the same reason why we make films and why we started the podcast. It wasn't about making money and becoming rich. We're doing it because we have a passion for it. We have stories that we want to tell, and the podcast is an offshoot of that. So I agree 100% with what you're saying. It's great advice for anybody out there. So
what's next for you? Where are you going with your site? What are you going with what you're doing? Maybe you'll be doing a podcast soon?
Interestingly enough, I think it was a few months back, because I was having to make a decision. Do I stick with the online magazine? Do I come back to my blog? And I was going back and forth in that decision. And it was actually Sebastian Spence, Rick Rabanello. I go to both of them. They know that I'm regularly coming to them for advice, which they're both really, really great at giving the advice. And I think it was actually Rick made it clear I need to definitely go back to my blog. That's where I'm happiest. And he was actually kind of my deciding voice on that. Because he has a way of talking that in no uncertain terms, this is what you need to do. And that was what I needed to hear. And then Sebastian and I have talked back and forth, messaging back and forth about possibly, if he's even offered that maybe he could help with this, we've talked about maybe eventually having some live interviews. It's possible we might get to that stage. We're not there yet, but it's something that would be maybe off in the future. Because again, I've only been interviewing since January, so
Sure.
I mean that would be something. But I know that no matter what, even if I do start doing doing interviews like that, that I would still always go back to the writing, because what I've really been focusing on with the interviews, even more so as I go along, because of course I go back and I read the interviews that I did back in January and February, and I just think, what was I thinking? I didn't have a clue what I was doing. It's very clear. I mean, I can see it. I can look back and think those are really not very good compared to what I do now, because now I've learned so much more. But I really just want more, at least immediately right now, I'm looking more towards just continuing to refine my interviewing style, to refine the way that the questions that I ask. I'm trying to not always ask the same questions. I'm trying to make it very interesting, and really trying to bring the level of my writing skills up. Always trying to strive to be better, I guess I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really neat when the person I've interviewed, and this happens very regularly, especially now, that they come back and they just are blown away by what I say, because in the interview, because a lot of interviewers, and this is kind of, I think, something that separates me a little bit from a lot of interviewers. It's really easy. I think anyone who wants to interview, anybody can just put a transcript of an interview up. I mean, that's easy. That is extremely easy. The difference is that I take that, and especially at the end of each interview, I try to synthesize everything together and get an idea, present a perspective on that person. Again, going back to the thing of, I want you to be able to see the person as I see them. And I can't tell you how many people, the messages that I've gotten back from these actors and directors whom I have interviewed, they read that ending, the concluding paragraph about that I've said about them, and they're just blown away. They say if they're having a bad day, they're going to come back and read that, because they know that I'm very sincere in what I do, and they know that I'm putting positivity out there, which is something I'm very passionate about. Everything that I do in my blog is very positive. And so immediately, probably not live interviews, probably not a podcast, but eventually I'm definitely open to that.
I just wanted to thank Ruth Hill for taking the time out of her busy schedule to talk with us today. Her website is mydevotionalthoughts.net. You can check her out and follow her blog. And you can hit her up on Twitter at
Ruth Hill 74 at Twitter.
Yes, at Twitter. Yeah. All right. Thank you guys for listening. And this has been the Imperfect Podcast. Check us out at hecklerkane.com. And we'll put all the links for Ruth's blog down in our notes below. Thank you.